Welcome to another episode of Monster Monday from the Ready to Die channel. This series explores the design of a creature I have built for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. The stat block for this creature can be found over on the Monster Monday blog, as well as the Twitter and Discord, all of which are linked below. I actually built today's monster before I ever even started the blog, and never realized that I hadn't brought it over. So this week, we're revisiting the Radobaan from Monster Hunter. Wait a sec. I used this one already. Okay, there we go.
The wheels on the bus go round and round.
I originally built this monster over almost 5 years ago, but I've learned a lot about the game since then, and there's also been new creatures for me to reference. I still kept a lot of the old skeleton that I used for it. I kept the size and level, but while the Radobaan does demonstrate the intellect to cover itself in armor, I don't think it's smart enough to be considered a beast. I didn't even realize that that was a differentiating factor between beasts and animals back when I originally made the Radobaan. And I originally designed it with a -4 intelligence, while still giving it the beast trait. I've fixed that for this rebuild of the Radobaan, assigning it the animal trait. As a quick note about its level, the Radobaan is surprisingly low on the totem pole despite its size and fearsome appearance. It's a scavenger, not so much an active hunter, and can be surprisingly passive. Case in point, it's one of the first monsters you hunt in the Rotten Vale, and a lot of that is just chasing them all over the map, which is why I went for this low-mid level. It's worth keeping in mind that while Radobaan might be one of the weaker monsters, he is still a monster, and a big one at that. That sheer size sees our skeleton-shielded scoundrel using a high strength, as well as a constitution that is just a point below that. He's a big beefy boy. But he's not the most graceful of creatures, with a dexterity between low and moderate, and does seem a bit dopey, which is why it does actually have a low wisdom. Its other mental skills are even lower, but they are fairly negligible in regards to the rest of the build. Given the fact that the Radobaan is a scavenger and has that low wisdom, its perception is also low. I waffled between low light and dark vision for it, but it doesn't seem to be nocturnal, and while the Rotten Vale is dreary, it isn't terribly dark. At least not until you get to the caves, and that makes sense. To help it navigate this treacherous terrain, the Radobaan has a high athletics, playing into that strength and some other parts of its kit, while it also uses a low acrobatics. This is a skill I could maybe skip, but I think the Radobaan demonstrated some impressive balance while it's wheeling about the bone fields. Rolling into a discussion on defenses, or starting with a low armor class, which is a little uncharacteristic of me. I'm usually very cautious about using values like this, especially with the way critical hits work. The Radobaan actually has an ability that justifies this. Before that though, it is hit points, which use a moderate value. This could seem strange given its armor class, but it does have some solid resistances, taking reduced damage from electricity and fire while only having a weakness to cold. On top of that, the Radobaan has an ability that we're going to take a moment to discuss here. The reason behind the lower defensive values of the Radobaan is that I created its habit of covering itself in bones into a 3-action ability. This carapace gives the Radobaan 20 temporary hit points, which puts it at the low end of high HP, while also raising it to a high armor class, and giving it some minor physical resistance. While I wrote carapace to potentially allow it to shield itself with a variety of matter, I was basing the bludgeoning exception on the bones protecting it. Now, in my original design of this creature, this was only an exploration activity. The Radobaan would have to ditch the players and find 10 minutes to reapply its carapace, because that just made the most sense to me. But I might have been thinking too real-worldy for it. After discussing it with my test subjects in the Monster Mash, they convinced me to make it into a 3-action effect, though I applied some GM discretion-based limitations in that last sentence of it. The ability to refresh and restore these hit points, as well as the effects that come with them, saw me dropping its other defenses to compensate. Speaking of which, we should get back to those. We've still got the classic ladder here with a high fortitude, a moderate reflex, and then a low will save. These all just follow the related ability scores, which is a pretty basic lineup. And that leaves us off with the offenses of our Osseous Ogre. The main form of attack for the Radobaan is that Lantern Jaw of Justice that it has going on, which it can use to make strikes with at a moderate bonus. It's a little hard to see its targets over that big old chin. However, that does come with a high damage and the knockdown ability, something which helps set it apart from its tail strike. This attack comes with a high attack bonus, plus it has the sweep trait and longer reach, but then only deals moderate damage. Something else we can talk about here is its Fling Shard ability, which gives it a new strike while it has a carapace. The Radobaan is pretty restricted to melee attacks, and doesn't have the usual elemental assaults like a number of other creatures from Monster Hunter, but it will sometimes launch shards of bone at the hunter as well, which this is meant to represent. It gives it some decent range, but has a low attack bonus and low damage, mostly because it isn't something that the Radobaan is used to doing. There's certainly a possibility that I should make it a more powerful effect, but I struggle to do so due to the logic behind it. We've already covered a few of the Radobaan's abilities, but there's still quite a bit more to go, starting with Adhesive. This passive effect is suppressed while it has its carapace up, but is largely based on the Mimic's ability of the same name with a few changes. It takes a moderate DC to both avoid it and retrieve a weapon that gets stuck in it, or somebody trying to escape from it. This isn't actually an aspect of the Radobaan in Monster Hunter, but given how securely the bones stick to it, and the reason that they do so, I feel like it should be. It is notable that a creature that becomes stuck to the Radobaan in this way gets dragged along with it when it moves, though they do get a reaction to try to pull away. Which actually plays into some other aspects of his kit, but to talk about those, we have to start with talking about its Wheels Up. This whole part of the Radobaan's kit draws heavily from the Hooplamander, a creature introduced in the Howls of the Wild. For the Hooplamander, Wheels Up is a single action. The Radobaan isn't quite as graceful and uses 2 actions to do this instead. In return, at the end of its leap, creatures have to make a save against a moderate DC or become clumsy too, which is much more useful than the off guard that the Hooplamander inflicts. And it also represents the tremors that this large monster can create. Now once in this state, Radobaan can use Unfurl to leave it, making a jaw strike as it does, based on the way that it will sometimes spring out and then slam the ground. Alternatively, the main option here is Roll Out Trample. As per the name, it has the effects of a trample with a high DC, but it also leaves behind difficult terrain if it has its carapace, a carpet of bones to slow down others that are admittedly easily cleared. As a final effect of this ability, creatures that are stuck to the Radobaan when it does this take a worse save. Though, again, as I mentioned, they do get that reaction to pull free beforehand. Rounding out the Radobaan's abilities are its Sleep Spores, which affect a 15-foot emanation with a high DC save. Given the strength of putting creatures to sleep, this can only be used once per minute, and otherwise copies the effects of the sleep spell, with successes merely tiring them out. It's pretty straightforward, and was actually one of the main reasons I was considering giving the Radobaan a chance to make a break for it to reapply its carapace. I didn't include any gear for the Radobaan, because its main conceit and concept for its weapons and armor is sleep, which is a struggle to fit in properly, while also making it interesting. Like, there could be a Bond hammer that can once per day cast sleep or something, or cast it on a hit, but like I said, it feels a bit basic. The other armor skills are bleed, tremor, and sleep resistance, which also just feel like a bunch of very disparate effects, even if the armor is super cool looking. And my cat looks adorable in it. The abilities roll together pretty nicely for the Radobaan, just like it will hopefully roll over your players. Burdened but bolstered by its bony barricade, this burly beastie bowls over brigands with abandon, breaking but briefly to backpedal. It has been a while since I thought about the Radobaan, but it was really nice to return to it and take it for a spin. You know, kick the tires a bit. I hope you like it and can find some places to use it, and that I'm not just spinning my wheels here. More seriously, it could be interesting to run a Radobaan with a different carapace than Bones, maybe even one that grants it additional effects, such as fiery rocks that leave behind a trail of hazardous terrain when it uses its rollout. That's about it for the Radobaan though. Let me know what you think of this creature, as well as what other ones you'd like to see. You can check out the Monster Monday blog, Twitter, or Discord for the other monsters I've made, and all of that is linked below. Thanks for watching, and have a monstrous Monday.